Governor of Oregon, 𝗧𝗓𝗏, her new law says that tied together inner tubes are boats. Floating without a permit could get you fined $115. Also, if you don't have a permit for a kayak, for a canoe, a stand-up paddleboard, $115 fine for you. You need a permit. Government overreach? You think? Let's get into it. Here we go. Now, got to be honest, when I was, as opposed to dishonesty, which, we do all the time. Yeah, truth. It's relative. When I first started researching this topic, I looked at this story and I saw whom it was from. It was from that Oregon Life, Tyler James. And then I saw this next story, and this one was humor, news, and satire. 𝗧𝗓𝗏 announces $500 fine for unauthorized splashing on Oregon rivers. But I saw humor, news, and satire and thought, well, then my other one has got to be satire as well, because there is no way that you're going to make somebody get a permit for a couple of inner tubes tied together. And then I looked here and I go, news, not satire. And I looked at the House bill number and I was like, they really are making people get permits for stand-up paddleboards, canoes, kayaks. And if you put more than one inner tube out on the river, permit. You got to have a permit for floating down a river. That is how bad Oregon has become. And we're going to fine you if you don't. I mean, it's when satire becomes reality. That is literally the level that we are sitting at here in Oregon. I mean, look at these people. They're having a great time. But you got a permit? If you don't, we got to fine you. Here's your ticket for floating down a river. That is pure insanity. That is the level to which Portland and Oregon in general is needing to raise revenue. Let's read the story. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this was satire. Totally. But it's not. Starting January 1st, 2026, Oregon will require a water access permit for all boats on state waterways. And yes, even something as harmless as 2 inner tubes tied together will now officially count as a boat. I don't know. Got to tell you, I have done a lot of river rafting. We used to float with my kids were young, and I think even my ex-wife went out a couple of times, and we would float from Snoqualmie Falls, the base of Snoqualmie Falls, where you put your boat in. You could literally feel the spray, the overspray from the falls down at our put-in. And then we would float from there down a bunch of rapids. It was great. This is Snoqualmie Falls City, east of me here by 25 minutes, something like that. And then we'd float down to downtown Falls City and we'd get something to eat, and it was epic. It was epic. I had the boat with the cooler in it. I floated an actual raft. The kids floated in inner tubes. My ex-wife floated in, I don't remember. It was great. We had a lot of fun. As the kids got older and maybe as the kids got to drinking age, we had some shenanigans. That's kind of what you do, right? For years, watercraft under 10 feet long were exempt from permit requirements because they're not boats. These are not boats. These are personal watercraft, non-motorized. You know what I mean? This is absolute insanity. That's over now. Under a law signed June 24th by Governor 𝗧𝗓𝗏, House Bill 2982, anything that floats and isn't a single inner tube is fair game for regulation. Could you imagine getting a permit? Oh, you're going rafting? I got to get a permit. If I don't, I could get a big fine. This is revenue, right? This is massive overreach. This includes kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, canoes, and yes, even those patched up inner tubes you tied together with a rope for a lazy summer float. On that note, I just helped some friends of mine. We're going river rafting east of the mountains, kind of by Wenatchee. Where were they? They were, I can't remember where they were, but I patched up one of their inner tubes, a double, and gave it to them. and their inner tube popped again. And I also gave them a brand new one because I was going to give them one for my boat. We've got a bunch of inner tubes, but the River Run inner tubes that they make now, the ones that you kind of get in boxes at like Dick's Sporting Goods, those do not last. Those are made out of basically tiny, thin rubber. Back in the day, back when I was young, back when my kids were little, you could buy an inner tube and it would go forever. And yeah, you could patch it up and it'd be fine. You might get, one hole a season. But now those things, those River Run inner tubes, I can't keep them intact. On the boat where we're not floating down a river, going on top of rocks, I don't know what pops them, but they're just so thin that it's like they're disposable inner tubes. Yeah, I'm going to, my $30 inner tube or whatever they are, I'm just going to toss it after each one. Talk about not good for the environment. A bunch of rubber sitting around with plastic. Terrible. The state says that the change is meant to raise money for invasive species prevention programs like zebra and quagga mussel control. What in the F are you talking about? Zebra and quagga mussel control. Is that even a thing? Does that even exist? Somebody let me know. Is that, are we just making stuff up? But for many Oregonians, it feels like yet another example of government finding a way to tax people on anything that touches the water. How about taxing all the homeless people dumping stuff into the water? How about fining those people for setting up homeless communities on the Willamette River? How about fining them for setting up homeless communities on the Columbia River? I mean, we've done podcasts on that. Those people aren't getting fined anything. They're not paying anything. How about just make them get a permit for their homeless encampment on the river? What about that? How about we do that? Instead of people who are paying their taxes and want to float down one of these bad boys. On a Saturday afternoon, it's 90 degrees outside. It's fun. I mean, if you haven't done that, it is super fun. There's no snakes. There's not a shark that's going to come up and bite you. I get asked that all the time. Is Washington, do you guys have any, in your lakes and stuff? Do you guys have anything come up and bite you, get you? No, we don't. At this rate, some are wondering if kiddie pool in your backyard will be next. You've got a child's pool? Is that in excess of 1,292 gallons? Because if it is, you need a permit. The new permit fees are $6 for a 7-day permit for a week. $6. $20 for a 1-year permit. $35 for a 2-year permit. And you know those numbers are just they're going to the moon, aren't they? Yeah. All right. And pretty soon it's going to be $129.99 for a 48-hour permit. Otherwise, the fine is $500. That is what's going on in Portland. I am surprised Washington State hasn't pulled this one out. And don't think this is just an idle threat. Oregon State Police and local Marine patrols will enforce the rule. Why? This is just stupid. With fines starting at $115 for anyone caught floating illegally. Permits will be available online through the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and at participating outdoor retailers. We have here in Washington State what we call the Discovery permit. It's, you stick it on your rear view mirror thing and Discovery. It allows you to get into a bunch of parks. And I don't really have a problem paying for that because that goes back towards, actually what it's for, which is maintaining the parks. This whole thing, if you want to tag people for actual boats, for jet skis, for boats, motorized things that actually impact the water, then I don't have a problem. But a stand-up paddleboard? No. A kayak? No. Hell to the no. These are all things that typically, they're inflated with air. You're floating on air. You're not impacting anything. Nothing. But, this is Oregon. This is the crazy train they're going down. The shenanigans they are putting in place to make this go. As temperatures rise and people head for the water, critics argue the state is nickel-and-diming residents under the guise of environmental protection. Supporters say it's a small price to pay to protect Oregon's lakes and rivers from invasive species like the dreaded zebra and quagga mussels. I've never even heard of those things. So if you're planning a relaxing river trip this summer, make sure your 2 inner tubes and a rope are properly licensed. Because in Oregon, even that counts as a boat now. That is some just absolute insanity. Just some mind-blowing, what do you even say? Literally. So let me read this next story for you, the one that is satire, which it's almost hard to know the difference now. I know a lot of you guys send me memes. Love it. I get tons of those. I look at them all. I try to respond as many as I can. But these are like the memes that are real life. 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗕 announces $500 fine for unauthorized splashing on Oregon rivers. This is funny. I'll read it quickly. In a bold new effort to restore order and tranquility to Oregon's waterways, Governor 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗦 unveiled legislation this week that would impose a $500 fine for unauthorized splashing. Too many Oregonians think they can just hop on an inner tube and recklessly thrash water around like it's the Wild West, 𝗧𝗠𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗕 said during a press conference. This isn't a playground. Our rivers are delicate ecosystems that deserve respect and minimal turbulence. Under the proposed law, all splashing activities, including but not limited to cannonballs, water fights, and accidental paddle flings, would require a state-issued splash permit. The permit, priced at $49.99 annually, would authorize controlled splashing in designated areas only. Violators caught splashing without a permit and face a $500 fine, mandatory river etiquette classes, and a potential confiscation of their inflatable watercraft. Legislation includes funding for a fleet of river enforcement specialists, or RES units, who will patrol popular float spots to monitor for unsanctioned splashes. Officers will be equipped with waterproof citation printers and GoPro body cams to document offenses. This is all satire. This is made up. This is make-believe. But it's not that far off of reality. This is the reality that we're getting to. And this is why people don't want to deal with this kind of nonsense. Oregon, when I used to take my children, my kids, my boys to, we would go to Sun River in Oregon. Epic place. You're in the mountains, you're high desert. I don't remember what the elevation is, but you got that smell of pine and high desert. It's super hot. You got that pine smell. It was great. We would float the Deschutes River, and it was amazing. This kind of thing is exactly what people who float the rivers don't want, because it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. We're not trying to ruin anyone's fun, 𝗧𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗕 reassured. No, I get that. You're just trying to create revenue sources and ruin people's fun by having to pay that. We're simply ensuring that water activities align with the state's commitment to safety, harmony, and revenue collection. That's funny. Reactions to the proposal have been mixed. Environmental groups praised the effort, while rivergoers expressed confusion. I have concern that I'm going to get a $500 fine for splashing in an area with my oar. So am I allowed to get wet at all? Asked Eugene resident Travis McMillan. What happens if I trip and splash accidentally? Do I owe Tina $500? Do I owe 𝗧𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗕 $500? Well, it sounds like it. When asked about such concerns, a spokesperson clarified all unintentional splashes must be reported within 72 hours to the Oregon Water Activity Compliance Bureau to avoid penalties. Poof! So we can accidentally splash. It's absurd, isn't it? But it's not that far from the reality. The bill is expected to pass easily in the legislation, where lawmakers are reportedly considering an additional amendment requiring helmets on all pool noodles, those big styrofoam things. You need a helmet on those bad boys. Crazy stuff, right? That is from Tyler James, author on both articles. One real, one not real. But the bottom line is you can barely tell the difference because they're both so absurd, making people get a permit for rafting, paddleboards, canoes, stand-up paddleboards. I mean, what's the other one? You know what I said. I said it a couple of times. You get it. You understand. But it's just like, what are we doing here? We got to do what? Could you imagine somebody coming in from out of town? They are just so pumped to be on a river in Oregon. Cause it's Washington, Idaho, Oregon have some epic floats. They really do. And you're floating down the river and somebody says, hey, they hit you on a bullhorn. And they're dressed up and they look like Army Rangers, but they're actually just, park rangers. They're Aquarian park rangers. And they go, we need you to come over. We need you to come. We got to check you for permitting. And the dad is like, I'm sorry, what? Permitting? Permit? We're floating down the effing river. Permit? I need a permit. Yeah. Yep. That'll be $115 fine for each one of your kids who's on these boats. These are not boats. They are floating personal watercraft. Yeah. Crazy stuff. But that is the kind of insanity that's going on in Portland, that's going on in Oregon, because they need the money. They need the money to support all of their absolutely ridiculous social programs that they've got on the books. You got to pay for those somehow. And now it's going to be that nice family. It's going to be those college kids running out there with a double inner tube. What? What permit? I didn't know I needed a permit. Yep. Now that you brought this to our attention, that's going to be a $115 fine. We need you to pay that up. Craziness, right? But that's the state that we're in 2025. Oregon, Greater Pacific Northwest. Guaranteed this will be picked up by Washington. Guaranteed. I'm surprised California doesn't have this on the book. Maybe they do. This is just such a crazy train idea that, although it's not, considering everything else that Oregon is making their residents pay for, this kind of falls right in line, doesn't it? Insanity. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. See you on the next one. Bye for now.